Okay. All right. Let's see here. Let me jump on over to our week for today. All right. Cool. So guys, we've got a pretty straightforward mission here today, and that is to give you guys sort of the final piece of the puzzle that you will need to not only wrap up your homepage, but ultimately the remainder of the project. We're going to talk today about using classes in HTML and CSS. And this kind of piggybacks on the subject of using classes with divs. We've actually already used classes. So it's not necessarily like an entirely like brand new topic, but we haven't used them a lot. So I would love to talk about using them today in conjunction with things, new things. I want to talk about using them with your navigation. I want to talk about using them with the placement of images and really their place and their role. So I'm going to be doing a couple of short coding demos with you guys. I actually already made a recording yesterday morning of using classes in a similar fashion, and the link to the YouTube video is right here. But I'm going to cover some of those same things, but I actually want to build upon it a little bit further. My expectations is that the demos will take about the first hour of class. That's going to leave a good like 45 minutes of time that I can use to specifically answer questions that you guys might have with your home pages, or as you begin to start creating your other pages. I did change a due date on the Prime Project 1. Originally, we were going to be having a critique of our home pages this week. I pushed that forward to next week because I very much still want to show you guys the techniques that we're going to be doing today. Okay, so if you looked at the original assignment sheet or even skipped forward to week 7 earlier, you might have noticed that it said that a beta version of Project 1 would be due today for critique. But again, that's going to be moved. I'll talk specifically about what I've been looking for from you guys. It's just a matter of looking at what we'll call your completed homepage. Yeah, I'll wrap up talking about that. But I would love to jump into Visual Studio Code and accomplish a few things with you guys. I'm realizing though, as I'm about to do this, that in the recording that I made for you guys yesterday, that some of the things that I'm going to cover today are already in the HTML documents. So I'll remove some of these things so that I can code them again for you guys. I'd like you to be able to kind of see it in real time so you can ask questions. So forgive me if as I open up like my homepage or my CSS document, I eliminate some code because rather than just showing you the completed code and talking about it, I'd rather talk about why I'm doing the things that I'm doing in real time. Okay. In addition to what I'm doing today, again, can't stress enough, a more shorter form of what I'll be doing today is already up in place on YouTube based on, again, a thing I did yesterday. But I guess let's first and foremost talk about like what it is that we're going to be doing. I'm going to start out in Visual Studio Code by opening up my homepage, which I probably already have open. Yep. But I'm going to take a few things out of here that I actually did. Let me take these things out because again, I want to do those from scratch with you. And I'm going to actually come in here and do the same thing. Just get rid of these, actually this line of code. Okay, cool. So at this point, let me just kind of refresh where we were with things here. In fact, this is something I need to eliminate as well. Let's see. Okay. So first and foremost, I'm going to start with a conversation about working with positioning our links in our navigation. So let's take a look real quick. I'm going to show you what my current page looks like based on where it was last week. So I'm just going to open up my index page. And we left off last class talking about how to style our links from an interactive standpoint, right? We're like, we built our hover states, we built our visited states, our active states, but the links Beyond that, we're just sort of grouped together, sitting there like in the middle of, the navigation container. And I'd love to talk about how to add some space between these, where we can really sort of, distribute them more evenly across the navigation area. So let's talk about the purpose of using a class in this case. So I'm going to show you two ways of doing this. One way without a class, but then we'll talk about doing it with a class and the advantages to doing it that way. Okay. So when we talked about styling links before, we did it with these 4 chunks of code where we did pseudo classes. Remember, we did the a link, a visited, a hover, and a active. And that's specifically for the interactive portion of this, for when the user is actually interacting with them. If you want to work with like the positioning of links, we can do it in a slightly more conventional manner than these pseudo classes. We can do it by just simply calling out to the a tag like this. Okay, I'm calling out to that a tag because in the HTML, we are calling out to these a hrefs and the closing a's there. So I could potentially add some space between those with some code like this. Easiest way to do this would be with a style, adding a margin. I'm going to do it to the left. We could actually do it to the left or the right. It wouldn't necessarily matter, but let's do sort of an abstract. We'll do sort of an abstract number here. Maybe I want to put like 50 pixels of space in between those links. So I'll do it like this, and I'll save that, and we'll see what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh my browser. And you can see, sure enough, we now have 50 pixels of space in between these. What it's doing essentially is before each of these, it's putting 50 pixels of space on the left-hand side. So, on one hand, that works, but it's not the most effective way to do it. And let me explain why. First and foremost, it's putting 50 pixels of space on every instance of an A tag throughout our entire site. So let's just say, for example, that maybe I had some text in here that linked to another page or linked to another site, or maybe I had an image that I made a link. The issue here would be that those would also have 50 pixels of space. So imagine if, maybe if this was a link, we'd have 50 pixels now of space to the left of it. Or an image, if it were a link, would have 50 pixels of space. In fact, every link now has 50 pixels of space. So that's a problem. But in the context of my page as it sits right now, since I don't have any of that happening, I'll show you an instance where it is causing a problem. It's actually causing a problem up here, and it may not be terribly obvious right now. So let me use a bigger number, and it will be very obvious. I'm going to go back into my code, and I'm going to go ahead and put maybe 150 pixels of space at the left side of each of these, and I'll refresh this. And take a look at what's happening now. Now you can very clearly see that my navigation isn't appearing to be centered anymore. That's because I've got 150 pixels worth of space before all of my links, including the home page. So it is centering them, but it's centering them based on the fact that the home link is getting bumped over 150 pixels first, and then it's centering things. So it would be better if I could just apply the spacing, the 150 pixels or whatever, however many pixels I want to space it, in front of just the last 3 links and not also bumping over this one. Okay, so this is where a class would come in, and this will be a little bit of review, but you just haven't seen it yet in the context of doing it with a link. Okay, so we're going to add the class in the HTML here, and I'm going to do that for the last 3 links, not the home page, because I don't want that to apply there. So we did this with divs. In fact, here, you can see it right here on my line 26 of code. There's a class in action. We made a class called content. So same rules apply here. It happens in the opening tag, and it's just a class attribute. Remember that all attributes will have an equal sign, and whatever they equal will always, always, always be in quotations. Okay. So since it's been a few weeks since we talked about working with classes, let me kind of remind you guys of a few rules of classes. You can name them whatever you want. Okay. The class name of content, I simply named that because that was going to hold my content. So while you can name them whatever you want, there's a couple basic rules. A class name can have a number in it, but it cannot start with a number. Okay, so I couldn't call it like, I don't know. I could call it link 1, but I couldn't call it one link. And also no spaces in your class names. And then finally, no special characters. Okay, you can put a dash, you can put an underscore, but no, they're special characters. So I like to name my classes something that's descriptive. So if I look at this project in a week from now or a year from now, I understand like what the heck I was doing. So being that this is going to be a class that I'm going to use to add spacing to my links, I'm going to name it in a manner that represents that. I'm going to go ahead and call this class link space. Okay, or maybe link spacer, I don't know. But I'm going to use that exact same class then for the other 3 links here. So I'm just going to copy that and I'll put it here as an attribute of the A tag there. Now, right now, that's not going to do anything all by itself. I have to then save this and go into my style sheet and then make a modification. So if I come over to my style sheet and I want to change this, I'm not doing it to the A tag anymore. Rather, I'm doing it to the link spacer class. Now, another quick review on dealing with classes. When you are coding a class in your style sheet, you must begin with a dot. So dot link spacer. Okay. I think I mentioned this before talking about classes, but it's worth repeating here as a reminder. This is one way that we can avoid putting a space in a name. So I intentionally capitalized the letter S in spacer. And that's very important. If you do this, it is case sensitive. Like it's absolutely case sensitive. So please make sure, however you name a class, that you do so in the style sheet. But this is a concept that developers use a lot. It's called camel casing, where you don't put spaces in the name, but rather you capitalize any additional words. Okay, so if I had a third word in here, that would be, also capitalized. All right, so I changed my margin left to apply now to the link spacer class and not just every link. I'm going to go ahead and save that and come on back over here. Actually, I guess I could just come over here and refresh. And there we go. So now that takes off the 150 pixels of space in front of home, that home link, and only adds it in these. Okay, so that's one really nice use of a class where we're applying it selectively to things rather than to all instances of those things. That kind of makes sense. That hopefully, I know it's kind of new to you guys, but is the logic kind of hopefully shining through there a little bit?
I get you.
Okay, cool.
Yes, but can I just see the coding again and your style sheet?
Absolutely. Yeah, let me pull that up for you real quick. In the style sheet, there we go. And that's what I did right there.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Cool. So let's talk about another instance where we might be able to use this. This is something I planned on doing with you guys, but it also helps answer a student question. Kathy had emailed me with an excellent question earlier in the week where she was like, I'm putting these images in and that's all wonderful, but what if I want to change the position of the images? Because up until now, I had just showed you guys how to insert an image, and really that was it. When you insert an image and you don't control it in your style sheet, the image will always come in and just be left aligned. That's the way that HTML works, is that things by default are left aligned. So I would love to talk a little bit about the positioning of images. Now, in the YouTube demo that I've already put up there, I talk about doing centering images. I talk about like right aligning images, but I'll talk today, I'll show you guys that, but I'll also take it a step further and say that maybe you don't necessarily want to position it right, left, or center, but rather you want to position it to an exact value. Maybe you want it like, I don't know, 50 pixels over from the left, or 200 pixels over from left. So I'll give you guys alignment options, but then also the ability to do very specific positioning as well. Okay. So again, let's talk, I guess, first and foremost about why we would use a class to do this. Because if I want to call out to an image, I would be calling out to the IMG or image tag. And if I do that, whatever instructions I give it, like let's say I tell this to be a right aligned image, the issue there that we're going to run into then is, of course, every single image, all of my images would be controlled by that. And I don't want that to happen. Maybe I want just a specific image to, be right aligned or left aligned. I shouldn't say left aligned. You would never have to write a style to left align an image because that's its default position. Okay, you would only need to write it if you want it to be right aligned, center aligned, or something of that nature. Okay, so I have some images. They're in Photoshop right now, but I have some images that I saved out to use for this little test for you guys. They look like this. They're just further cloud images. So I guess the first thing is, let me plug one in, because right up until now, the images that I have in place, I've got this banner and I've got this full width image, but those wouldn't really work very well to demonstrate alignment because they occupy the entire width of my wrapper. And I really want this to, it needs to be a smaller size image. So the first thing I'm going to do is plug in that image that I just showed you guys. And that'll happen here in my content area. I'm going to do that after this last paragraph. So quick review, inserting an image. We do IMG, SRC, and then mine is in my images folder. And I believe it's called Home Clouds 2. Yeah. Now let's see, I'm going to trust my memory here. I don't remember what the height and width was on this. I know the width is 480. I don't remember the height, but this is not a bad thing. I'll show you guys how I can figure out what the height is pretty easily. If you're not sure what the height and width is of an image that you want to plug in, you can always open it up in Photoshop and then go to image and image size, and it will tell you what the height and width of that image is. So in my case, it's 480 by 320. And I will add that. I do also need an alt tag. We talked about alt tags with images. I'm going to just call this like, I don't know, cumulus clouds. And then I do need to close that with the closing caret. Okay, so I'm going to save it. We'll take a look at it and we'll see what it looks like by default. And then we'll start to influence that state with a style sheet. So it's doing beyond just what the default states would be. So let's take a look here. I'll do it again. I'll do a refresh. There it is. Cool. So I plugged that in after this paragraph. And again, of course, by default, it is left aligned. All right. So let's talk about manipulating this. Let's see. So I will start with something really specific. So I don't want to just call out to it via image like this. Rather, I want to give it a class. By giving it a class, I can control just the things that have that class and nothing else. So let's just say I'm going to make a class here. For now, I'm going to call this something really generic because I'm going to manipulate it a number of ways. Once you've seen the various different ways that we can manipulate it, I'll come up with a name that's more specific and do a very specific thing with it. But let's just say for now, I'm going to call this class example. Okay, so because again, I'm going to show you many examples that we can do with this. So I can call out to it here in my style. Again, it's a class, so it starts with a dot, then the word example. And within there, we go ahead and we give it some instructions. So we would modify this using either what's called a left margin or margin left or a margin right. I'm going to start with a margin left to begin with. Okay, so we can do this by either A, giving it a specific value. And in fact, this is exactly what I was doing with my links a few moments ago, right? So maybe I want to bump this thing over, I don't know, 50 pixels. Okay, we'll save that. Let's take a look in the browser, give it a refresh. And there you go, right? So we added 50 pixels on onto the margin of the left-hand side of this image. Think of margin left as a way that you can position things over, and we primarily do it by controlling the margin left. Okay, let's have a conversation about this. Like, why don't we do the right side, we do the left? The left side is always going to be a consistent thing. So what do I mean by that? Think about how we view websites, guys. We kind of had a conversation about this on the very first day, like how do we view a website? Well, it happens in a browser. The browsers, like the biggest challenge, I guess, for us as web designers as compared to a traditional print graphic designer is this. If you're a graphic designer and you're designing a print-based piece, let's say a magazine or an ad, you know exactly what the size of that ad is, and in everybody's hand who gets a copy of that magazine, right? If it's a full page, you know, it's 8.5 by 11, and every single person who ever gets the copy of that magazine is going to have the exact same thing and the exact same dimensions in their hands. Versus when we're designing for the web, we have no control over the size of the thing that our audience is viewing our website on. They could be viewing it on a desktop or a laptop, which have tons of different size monitors, right? Some people have 27-inch monitors, some people have 21-inch monitors, some people have 19, 17, 13 inches. You have no control over that. Same thing with tablets and phones. I mean, the size ranges they just go on and on and on. So why am I talking about that? Well, I'm talking about that because of this whole concept of the left-hand side is always constant. So what I mean by that is no matter what the size of the device or the monitor that we're viewing a website on, every monitor has a 0 point, essentially. Its top left-hand corner. That's the constant thing. We can always start from a 0 point up the top left-hand side. And it makes it very, very easy for us to start controlling things if we think of the left-hand side also as a constant. Like this is sort of the 0 axis, and we start to push over from it. We very rarely actually will count over from the right-hand side, because that right-hand side of a monitor, we have no control over how big their monitor is. So as web designers, we generally try very hard to count over from the left-hand side. It's our constant. Okay. Now I will show you how to work with the right-hand side for some specific reasons. Okay. But that's the reason why I'm beginning with like the left-hand margin thing. All right. So you saw how to push that over, 50 pixels. We could obviously noodle around with that number. If I wanted to come over more, I could change that value, and you can see what it looks like if we push it over 250 pixels. And that's, all well and good. But what if we maybe wanted it to write a line and we didn't want to have to do the math, because like I could figure out like the width of this whole container that it's in is 960 pixels. And the width of my photo is 320. And of course we could minus 960 or subtract 320 from 960, but like who wants to do that? And who wants to do that for every single image? There's a much easier way of doing that where we'll let the code do the math for us, okay? So if we want to get something to write a line, we can use a handy bit of code that looks like this. Instead of doing a left margin or a margin left at a specific value, I can say auto. And what it's going to do is it's going to just push the element all the way over as far as it can. Okay. So let's take a look at what that looks like now. Let's see. That's not acting exactly the way that, oh, okay. There's one more thing I have to do this. If we're going to use a auto margin like this, we have to add one more line of code, okay? A image by default will not respond to an auto margin because an image is what is called, okay, this will require a little bit of explanation, and I'm gonna do it via code. There is code that is called, we can access in style sheets, called display. An image by default displays as something that's called inline. Inline elements, if you add multiple copies of them, they will display inline or horizontally, okay? So in fact, I would never actually tell an image to display inline because that's what it is by default. In order for it to respond to our margin left auto, we have to change its default display from inline to block. Block elements stack on top of one another. So things like div containers or paragraphs for type or H tags we worked with, those are all by default block. So it will not listen at all to the margin left auto if we don't add this line of code as well. Okay, so I'll save that. We'll test it out. And there we go. It's looking very good. Okay, so that's how we would right align something, is by setting its margin left to auto, as well as setting its display to block. Okay. Now, in a real project, if this is where I was going to leave it, I would probably make a class then that was far more specific. Like, for example, I might, if I wanted like to have a class that I could use anytime I want to right align an image, I might actually call it something like right align image. Okay. And then of course I would have to do that here as well. Make sure I spelled both of those correctly. If I refresh this and it's still working, there we go. Cool. So I did spell it correctly. Let's maybe build another one where we do like a center align. Okay. So we'll do that one next. So for a center alignment, I would want to set my margin left to auto, and I'd want to set my margin right to auto. Okay, so this line of code is going to want to push it all the way over to the right. This line of code is going to want to push it all the way over to the left, and the result in the middle then is that we have something that is centered. Okay, so if I were to, oh, got to put a dot in front of that. There we go. Save that real quick. So we'll do a center line image, test that sucker out. Oh, so it's not working at all. And I probably missed a line of code. Probably did not set its display. Yep, sure enough, I did not set the display on this example. So I got to do that real quick. Again, it will not respond to auto margins if it is not set to display as a block element. All right, we'll give that a save. Test her out one more time. There we go. So that would be how you would center something. In fact, let's make some comments in here. So I'm going to add a CSS comment. Remember that comments begin with a slash and a star. Oh, come on. There we go. So this is to write line. I have to close my comment then with a star and a slash. And I'll make another example here where we say this is to, oh, totally spelling that wrong too. This is to center align an image. Okay. All right. So that essentially takes you guys through right aligning an image, center aligning an image. Again, notice I didn't do a left align. There's no reason to ever left align because by default it's left aligned. So you just wouldn't have to do anything if you want something, if you want an image to show up at the left. And then again, if you wanted a specific value, I'll rewrite one of those just so you guys have that as well. So maybe we make one that says, I'll call this one image. Let's call this like specific. This is a very generic name, but I'm calling it this because this is just an example. Specific image margin. I don't know, hopefully that makes sense. It's kind of a weird name. But I can do, again, I can do a margin dash left and then call out a specific value. I'll do, I don't know, 50 pixels. And then if I want to test that out, I can go ahead and add that here. Okay, make sure everything is saved. There we go. Cool. So, I guess to kind of build on that a little bit as well, let's talk about a few other things. Let's just say maybe I also want to control the spacing above the image. Maybe I want more spacing above it. That can be done with doing this. You can do a margin top, and you can add a value there. I'll put a big one in there so you can see a nice difference. There we go. So that gives me 100 pixels on the top there. Maybe we tighten that up a little bit. Okay, there we go. Cool. You really wouldn't use bottom margin. Rather, if you wanted the footer, let's say, to like, you know, I'm using footer as an example because it's the thing that comes next. But if you want to do it with a paragraph or anything that comes next, you would do the top margin on that element. So like as an example, if I wanted my footer to come down a little bit, I can go find that and I can give it a top margin as well. Or margin top. It always starts with the word margin. So margin dash top. Maybe we count down 100 pixels on that, give that a save. And in theory, when I refresh, yeah, there we go. Cool. So that's how you can start to add some additional spacing. Kind of gets back to some of the things we did in the box model assignment that you guys had already worked with. You know, you can do that for any of these things. If I want more spacing on a header, you know, if I want, you know, more space on the top or more space on the left, easy enough to do. So that starts to empower you guys to move stuff around a little bit. So you can see here, I actually did that with a padding. We can kind of talk about padding as well. Padding is great for, let's see, a padding right wouldn't even necessarily be a thing there. For an element like this kind of an element, there actually really is no difference between a padding and a margin. Padding and margins, though, are very different when you're applying them to a container, okay? But I could easily just do, you know, a margin left here and it would look exactly the same for all intents and purposes. Yeah, no visual change there. But if I wanted to modify that, again, I certainly could. Maybe I wanted to indent a little bit. So I up that value. There you go. As you can see now, it's starting to control that. Yeah, let's see here. Oh, I wanted to maybe bump this down a little bit. That's why I came up here. So I could do a, you know, do a margin top on that. Maybe I want that to come down an additional 25 pixels or something. And if I refresh, this header should now come down 25 pixels. Oop. No, something going on there. Let's use a bigger value. I just want to make sure that that's actually working or not working first. Yeah, there we go. 25 is just too small of a number to actually notice. So I'll try that one more time because that's a little obnoxious. There we go. Cool. So you can absolutely use those margins to start pushing things around. Again, though, strongly recommend getting in the habit of using margin tops to push things down by adding padding or margins on the top and margin left to push things over. At this point, really, you should only ever use a margin right in conjunction with a margin left to center something. Otherwise, especially once we start getting into responsive coding, all sorts of wacky stuff happens, guys, and it becomes very difficult to keep things, in control. So if you take anything at all from what we're talking about today, try very hard to stick with just margin tops and margin lefts. And that essentially what that's doing is pushing things down and over to position things. On the subject of classes or margins, at this point, do you guys have any questions about that subject before I move on to making our subpages? Any questions at all on those?
I have a question.
Sure.
For the image that you push to the left, I would like to put the words or writing in the right side. How would I do that?
So for that, I'm going to strongly recommend that you hold off on that until our second website. For this, there's a reason why we're doing this with a single column, because I'm going to show you guys in the second project how to code properly multiple columns. We can technically do it with a single column using a style code that's called floating. This is an old way of doing things, and it's not a great way of doing things. You lose a lot of control. But on single column sites, folks will use a float right or float left to float an image and then get the text to wrap around it. But it's not current technology, and it's not the way that things are done from a best practices standpoint. So truthfully, if you really want to have multiple columns, this is definitely not the project to do that on. So I recommend one of a couple of things so that things look good within your project, so you don't just have like these big empty voids. One suggestion would be to have images that are sized to a width of 960 pixels. Or another option for you is putting smaller images right next to each other to fill those gaps. So as an example, let's see, I would need an image. Let me do some quick math. So I would need an image that would be no wider than 480 pixels. Let me I'm just going to make a couple of images real quick that I can show you like how to do this technique. So let's see. Let me get an image of a cloud. That will probably work. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually just going to paste this in here. Okay, let me resize this as well. I want this to be, maybe I'll make this like, I don't know, 400. Okay, let me write down these values real quick because I'm going to need to code that. All right, I'm going to save these real quick for the web, and I will show you how to get images, let's say, next to each other to take care of some of that space. Let me just call this cloud example 1.jpg and save this guy also for the web. Call this one cloud example 2. Okay. So if I wanted to do like multiple images like this, I could. Let's see, let me get a paragraph of type in here to kind of separate one image from this pair of images I'm going to put in there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and code my first one. Image source. So this was cloud example 1. For this basic example, I'm not going to worry actually about typing in a height and a width because I'm going to pull them out. I won't actually use them. Let me just get them in place real quick so you can see how images like to act when they sit in line. There we go. Images like I mentioned earlier, by their very nature, like to sit in line with each other like this. Now we can certainly add a class to these and add a little space in there to push this guy over and maybe push this one over as well. In fact, I'll do that with, let's make a class that we maybe just call, I'll do it in the one that we already have in there in this. Let's just do this one image example columns, and maybe we give it a left margin of just 50 pixels. Okay. So if I apply this class to both of those images, they'll both have 50 pixels of margins on the left hand side. And let's see, 50 might not be the best math. Actually, that looks pretty darn good. But you can do it very easily with images. And this is absolutely acceptable, like modern semantic HTML. But I'm going to avoid going down the road of floating and talking about text on the sides of things for this, because it's just not set up the way that we would want to do that. And it will open up a bad can of worms that I would be teaching you guys ultimately like a poor way of coding. I'd be teaching you a very old way of coding. Okay. So keep that in mind, certainly for your next project, that we will absolutely be doing multiple columns, you know, text columns next to text columns and text columns next to images and you know, layouts in their full glory. But this is definitely not the project for that. Okay. Okay, guys, any other questions specifically about classes? Otherwise, what we'll do next is we'll move on to talking about our, you know, some strategies for making your sub pages, you know, at page 2, 3, and 4 fairly quickly. Okay. All right, cool. So you might recall that at the end of class, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, I had you guys save out copies of your home page, and we called it page 2 and page 3 and page 4. We did save as's. And, you know, if you've tried your links, it'll link to those pages. They just don't look like much, right? Remember these? They looked like this. Okay. So let's talk about, you know, some strategies for getting those in place. For example, notice on these pages, we don't have our banners, or at least I don't have my banners in there. And my homepage, or to say my links, they're not styled, at least spaced out the way that my homepage is. Okay, so I had created some banners and saved them out. So I've got 4, just like you guys do now, that I've got saved to my images folder. And so I'll just do, maybe I'll do a couple of these pages. I don't think, I feel like I've got to do all 4 because it's just the same thing over and over again. So I think if I do this once or twice, you'll get the idea. But eventually, after your homepage is done, you're going to want to get moving on then with populating page 2 and page 3. So it's just a matter of opening those up and starting to plug in your stuff. Okay, so what I mean by that is, just like we did on our homepage, I'm on page 2 now. I'm going to want to put my image in the banner area. So I will go ahead and do that real quick. That was called page 2 banner. Give it an alt tag. I'm not going to worry about filling it in right now. It's got a width of 960. And it's got a height of 360. And if I save that and test this page out in the browser with a refresh, there we go. Now that banner is in place. Now notice that the navigation does not look like page 1 or homepage's navigation where we have the spacers in there. That's because we just don't have the classes that we made yet in place. And we can just totally copy and paste them. You know, we can look at our index page and look at the navigation and remember that we have the link spacer class that we made today, and that gets applied to the last 3 links. So I can just copy that, or I can hand code it either way. I'll just put them in there. Okay, this is something I think that a lot of new designers will forget to do, is that they just assume that those classes will appear in those other pages. So we have to, we have to put them in place. And then, of course, once you save the page and you test it out, there we go. Now those are actually spaced out. Now I do have an issue there with my home. That's kind of interesting. Something going on up in there. Let's see. Okay. Well, we got some debugging to do. Let's see what's going on. Clearly, this has got more padding over here than my home page. So there's some discrepancy there. Let's see. One thing I can do to just ensure that the code is the same is just go to my index page and copy the entire nav and come on over to page 2 and just plug that in. That's one thing I can do. Let's give that a quick save and test this out one more time. There we go. Yeah, there was something I did not that I missed on that. No biggie though. I'm glad you guys saw that. Sometimes it's easier just to copy the whole chunk of code. But again, I would need to do this then with the additional pages. So it's just the same sort of thing. It's a bit redundant, to be honest with you. It's kind of getting the robot mode where you're just doing the same steps over and over again. I can open up page 3, paste the home page's nav right over page 3. Same thing with page 4, just highlighting the whole nav area and pasting. And then of course, I've got to get the headers in there, the header image. I'm just gonna copy this. There's no reason to write that whole thing out over and over again. So I'll copy that image code and I'll just simply change the image that I'm calling to. I called them each page 1 banner, I should say home banner, page 2 banner, page 3 banner, page 4 banner, specifically because not only is it descriptive, but I knew that I could get in here and I could just change a number each time to the file name. And now we should have something, there we go, where at least the banner pages on all of these are set up and looking good. And it would then just be a matter of me, and I don't know if you guys noticed like the little flicker that's happening there with like the red. That is we're seeing the red background inside of the header area is showing up before the image loads in. So if you have that, I would recommend that you go into your style sheet and you can correct that by, let's get to my style, there it is, just going into that container, so the header, and then just removing, whatever background color you might have had in there. That's why we're getting that brief red flicker. Should be gone now if I refresh this. Yep, no flicker at all now. Okay, cool. But then ultimately, it's just a matter of plugging in the new content on these pages using the exact same pieces of code that you did before. Get your headers in place, get your paragraphs in place, get your new images in place. Okay. It looks like I obviously have not coded my footer yet. Fairly common question that I get is like, what do I even put into a footer? So maybe let's have a conversation about the footer. On a real professional site, footers are oftentimes used for copyright info, or for like social media icons would be another great example. This being a fictitious site that doesn't, come along with social media content, we could just go ahead and do a basic like copyright statement, or you could even put in, if you want to give credit to the folks that you got the images or information from, this would be a wonderful place to put that. So like, for an example, I'll go ahead and do something like this. Maybe I'll type in like all images copyright of the respective owners. And let's just say maybe I got all my photos from a particular source. Here, let's try something real quick. Let's just say maybe, I got these just by Googling, but let's just say maybe I got these from like a specific cloud photographer. And I maybe want to give that person credit. This would be a wonderful opportunity for me to show you guys how to do a link out to another web page, one that's not in our own site. So maybe I got them, let's just, put on your imagination helmets here and imagine I got these from here. So this is what the Alfred, actually I'm just going to copy that because I will not remember that, or I'll write it down. Let's see. Just a moment while I jot that down. Okay, cool. So maybe in my footer, I'm going to credit that. So I'm going to put in a break tag. So I go down one line of code. And I'll go ahead and put in, let's say, Alfred. I have no idea how to pronounce that. I'm not going to butcher that name. Get that in place, and we'll do collection then as well. Okay, So if I wanted to turn that into a link that went to that website, so I already copied the URL. So let's make that happen. So we have talked about A tags. And we've talked about the href property. That's the link itself. In this case, though, I'm going to paste that URL in for my href. And I'm going to show you there's another modification I'm going to want to do to that. But I'll go ahead and I'll wrap up the A right there. Oh, something going on. Let's see. I have an error in my coding somewhere. It should not be looking like that. Where I'm seeing an error here, or at least it looks like an error, is this red. What is that? Okay, so it thinks there's an error. I don't see one, but let's test out in the browser and we'll see. Okay, well, let's go to the home page and take a look. Yeah, so I don't see that link there. So there is clearly an error. Let's see, I got my ahref. Equal sign, quotations.
You have the closing curate.
Yeah, A tag is not closed.
Got it closed there, but not on the front of it.
Yeah.
Well, I've got my A tag here.
And then don't you have to close it?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing here. So a closing A tag would be this, but it's clearly not, it's not registering that as it. I wonder, okay, why is that happening? Why is it opening?
For the first A tag.
Right, the first A tag. You gotta
Which
put
is
the right side carrot. The right.
Oh, yes, thank you guys. Right here. There we go. Thank you guys. Cool. That's awesome that you guys can pick that out and figure that out. Thank you. All right, cool. So we should be in good shape now. There we go. Oh, there's still something going on there. Let's see, because we shouldn't be seeing the href. So let's see here. I'm still not getting something correct here. Oh, yeah, this caret doesn't go here. That caret goes right here. And then this is the closing caret or chunk of that. There we go. Okay, cool. All right, one more try on that. There we go. Cool. So this, of course, is picking up on my link, style. Now, if we want the stuff inside of our navigation, of our footer, to be styled and maybe centered, that's also something we can certainly do. Let's talk about that real quick. That will happen in our style. And I'll go here to my footer. Okay, so a few things. Maybe my background color is not green, but maybe we'll make it black. Now I'm going to go ahead and set the text align property to center, and that will center my type. Okay, this is going to be an awesome opportunity for me finally now to show you the difference between a margin top and a padding top. So let me save this and refresh and show you where we're at. Okay. Oh, so I've got black text on black background. So let me just fix that real quick. Color, say white. That'll change the text color to white. Okay. And maybe I'll give it a font family and a font size then as well. And I'm going to do a smaller font size for this. 10 pixel. It's a footer. It doesn't necessarily need to be, anything crazy in terms of size. There we go. All right. So the margin top that I have here, that is taking the footer and it's pushing it down or adding 100 pixels of margin at the top. But what if we want the stuff inside the container to get pushed down? Not the container itself to get pushed down, but the stuff in the container. That's where we could use a padding top. So the way to think about this is padding is anything inside of a container. Margins is the stuff outside of the container. So maybe put 50 pixels of padding at the top there, and we'll save it and we'll test it out. And there we go. So that's maybe a little bit more than I probably needed, but that was sort of a guess. Maybe we do 30 pixels of padding. There we go. That's looking better. Okay. And, maybe even for my text color on this, since it's all white, maybe I'll just make that like a gray color for the copyright info. And there we go. Cool. Now, one more thing I want to show you on a link that goes outside of your site. Okay. If I stop here, this would be a little bit irresponsible because I never do what I just did in a real project because of this. If I click on this now, it goes there and I just lost my website. I would have to actually click the back button to get back to it. I'm not a fan of that because the way that I tend to work, like if I go outside of the site and I close this tab, on accident, I gotta really, really, really want to go back to that website to re-Google it or retype in the URL. So I'm going to show you guys something that I do for all of my client sites as well as my sites. And that is when I use a link like this, and this is called an absolute link, meaning that it begins with an HTTP://. So it's going outside of our site. So there's one more property that you'd want to add to this link, and it would be a target property. And we're going to use a target that's called _blank. This is going to open up that other website in its own tab. Okay. So if we save this and we open up our index page and we scroll on down and we click on that link now, notice that it opened up in its own tab and my website is still here. I don't have to hit the back button. In fact, I can't hit the back button. We just simply, our site is still always there. I can't recommend that enough when you're linking out to an external site using that _blank target. Okay. But here, otherwise the site's looking pretty good. I do have this still as the example. Maybe I'll tweak that real quick and make that centered again. But I'm liking the way at least that this is starting to come together now. So yeah, I'll do the center align on that middle one. And I suppose I should wrap up by talking about getting that footer then onto all of the other pages. So let's do that next. Let's see. I lost that name that I just copied. So that's just going to center this image. That example was kind of bugging me. Cool. So yeah, that's good. All right. So the footer. So we made those changes on the footer on the index page. If I want that to be applied to the other pages too, I just simply copy that footer code, jump over to the other pages where I've got my generic footer in place, and I just paste that in all of those. So it goes really quick, guys, in terms of getting this, the rest of these pages hammered out. Especially once you've got that home page done, it shouldn't take you, probably will take you as long to make your home page as it does to make all of the other pages, because most of it's just copy, paste, or just plugging in information. Okay. And at this point now, we have all of the subpages with, oh shoot, they still say feats. I do have to tweak that, at least on that one page it says feats. So I'll have to make a tweak there. It looks like I forgot to do it on page 2. Yeah, or I didn't save page 2 perhaps. There we go. Yep, I did not save page 2. There we go. So now all of my pages have the footer in place. They've got our spaced links, and it would just be a matter of me going, and they've got the banners in there. So it would just be a matter then of actually plugging in the the content for those other pages. Okay. So that's very much where you want to get things moving into next week so that we can have a proper critique on your site and give you some feedback. That way, when you turn it in the following week, you just have an opportunity to make changes and get it wherever you potentially want to have it for the final submission. Questions, guys? Anything you can think of that, along the way that maybe you'd like some further explanation or a specific example of something that you've got going on in your project you might want to talk about or have me show you how to tweak?
Could you briefly go to the footer coding on the style CSS?
Yeah, absolutely. On the style page?
Yeah.
Yep, you got it. Let's see. Footer. It's gonna be up here. There we go. Yeah, so there's a number of things I did there, right? Like I gave it a height, background color, font family, font size, color. Remember that refers to the color of the fonts or text in it. Text line center, that's what gets all of that type to center. Margin top, I did just to demonstrate how to push the footer down. That's why it's going 100 pixels down from the content. And then the padding top is the spacing right up here. And I'll pull that up again so you guys can see that. Yeah, and I do understand too. I move fairly quick because I'm copying and pasting and moving this stuff around. So yeah, anytime you guys want to see code, just ask. And of course, as once this thing gets processed too, you can go ahead and watch this as many times as you'd like.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Great question. Let's see. Other comments, questions, concerns? Oh, okay, cool.
So what do we have to do for this week then?
So for this week, at a very minimum, for next week, I want to see a finished homepage from you guys. We would, if you get, I would recommend trying to get all the other pages in place as well. However, we can still have a substantive critique if I'm just seeing the homepage, because realistically, the other pages are going to look very, very similar, right? Just with different images and different, body copy. But minimum, I want a homepage finished for next week that we can critique. Best case scenario, if you've got the time and you're feeling comfortable with this, bang out the other pages. That would be the dream scenario would be to have all 4 done. But next week will be a different week than the last few, where we're going to do a critique. I'll pull up, you're going to submit your site, and I'm going to unzip it, and I'm going to pull it up in the browser and give you some feedback on it. So that, again, so you guys have an opportunity to tweak things then for the final submission for this. So what that ultimately does for us is that next week, which would be the 12th, that's our critique. The 19th will be the day that this is actually due, which is 1 week more than it says in the assignment sheet. So I will post an announcement for you guys. In fact, I'm gonna make a note here. I'm gonna not only post an announcement that mentions that due date change, but I'll change the content in the next 2 weeks. In fact, next week's content has already changed. If you went there and looked, it says that we've got our critique for the homepage there. But I'll change the date for the final version of this project to be due on the 19th. And to also just kind of reinforce that, I will send an email out to all of you guys with that final project 1 due date being moved to the 19th. So ultimately, you guys get an extra week to work on this compared to what the assignment sheet said, which is not a bad thing. We'll be able to make up that lost time pretty easily here during the second half of the semester. Okay, cool, guys. Any other questions that you might have?
You said it was best to avoid floater images.
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
Best to avoid like the float images because I did that.
I would recommend it. I mean, if you did it and you're comfortable with it, I mean, and it looks good, you can do that, but it's a dated way of doing things for sure. The issue that you'll run into with that, that I would say if you're floating things, please make sure that you also understand how to clear things that are coming next so that they don't get wrapped up into the float as well. So yeah, my general advice on this project is to avoid floating things. Just in general, with the web in general, floating is a very old, outdated way of doing things. I mean, it used to be the only way. That's how we would actually create multiple columns back in the days before we had containers to work with, and we used to work with, you know, about as crazy as we could get was working with tables to create grids, which is not a great way of doing it. But I will certainly allow you to use the floating if you got a good handle on it and you know how to properly clear things. Cool, go for it. Otherwise, yes, I would avoid floating.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll find that you can put together a very good looking site without multiple columns by simply either using full 960 pixel width images or centering images that are not full width, or for very small images, just displaying them in line like so. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, again, guys, you will find on the next project, we will do 2 columns and 3 column layouts where you can really kind of, flex your creative, muscles, doing far more, just far more creative layouts, But this project is much, much more about learning to walk before we run. Okay, cool. Any other questions, guys? Okay, cool. So to wrap up then, I want to just kind of mention as well, I've received a couple emails this week that had mentioned that they hadn't seen a grade yet for the box model project. That has not been graded yet. So if you're wondering like what's going on with that, I'll get that graded before the next time that we meet. And then this project itself, I grade the multiple components all at one time. So after you guys submit it, you'll get your feedback on all of the steps that you've completed with it. Okay. And that'll be done within a week because that effectively is like your midterm grade. But everybody's doing really well. If as long as you're continuing to turn in the individual components on this, you're in great shape, because up until now, it's essentially all the components that I'm grading, other than the banners. It's all very cut and dry, coding that you're getting graded on. Now that'll change in the final version that you submit to me. I'll certainly be evaluating these from a design standpoint, looking at the color harmony, looking at your typographical hierarchy, and then obviously looking at the image quality as well. All right, cool. Well, guys, if there are no more questions, I will stop end the meeting so that the recording can process. And of course, as always, I'll get that uploaded. And again, just to reiterate, those will go. I'll put the link to that where I've put all of our class recordings here in the Zoom recordings. So it will get added here. But also, if you would like to look at any of that stuff before that gets processed, a shorter version of what I just did, using basic classes in HTML and CSS, can be found here. And that's only a 15-minute video, so a quick review on that. All right, cool. Well, as always, if you guys need anything from me between now and next week, just reach out to me via email. This is definitely the part of the semester where there tends to be a lot of coding questions. So if you are asking me a coding question, just please zip your entire root folder and attach it to an email and send it over. Even though it would have, all of your, your multiple folders in there. Don't worry. I know what I know where to go and look for it as long as you're following the same folder structure as me. And the file size on that will be, next to nothing. So no worries. All right, cool. Well, last call. Any other last minute questions here, guys?
I don't have any, but have a nice day.
Yeah, you as well. I would say, I rarely encourage you guys to not do your work and get outside, but it's gorgeous outside right now. It's 75 degrees. So, if you have the opportunity, maybe take a few minutes and get outside and enjoy it, because this will not, we'll be sitting here in a few weeks like begging for 75-degree weather. So, all right, folks, again, reach out to me if you need anything at all. Otherwise, have a fantastic week, and I will see you guys next time. And I'm really looking forward to seeing those home pages.
Hey,
Okay.
have a good
All
one.
right. Have a good day.
Yep, you too. Thanks.
Thank
Thank you. Have a good day.